So today we got a 14H Caterpillar, and slope sensor is not working. Light doesn't come on, and it's also I came here before and noticed that the MC square sensor was getting super hot, and I found out this cable was actually shorted out inside. So we cannot get these Topcon cables right now for some reason, probably all this whole COVID thing and imports and all that. But so I came out today to replace this cable and hopefully reuse this connector. So you'll see that I'll replace this whole cable. It runs up through the nose and back to the MCR3, but I don't have the sensor on me to test it or calibrate it, so I'll have to wait on that sensor, send it to the shop for testing. But we can troubleshoot the slope sensor as well. It's not getting any power for some reason, and they could still use a system with just the slope sensor and not the blade sensor, but we'll have to figure out what's up with that cable, most likely the cable. So let's get started. So we got slope sensor out. Let's see what settings they got this on. Alright, so they got a GPS antenna, so GPS, 3D slope. Probably won't work in 3D slope. Let's see what it comes up. We got GPS, slope sensor not connected. Okay. Alright, so no slope sensor connected. Well, that kind of makes sense. Let's take a look. We're reading main fall. No blade rotation, no blade slope. I have this cable disconnected. This is the one for the MC2. This is the one for the blade slope. Actually, wait a minute. Yeah, that's the one right there for blade slope. Also goes into other things too. I actually think the blade slope, yeah, that comes straight off of the main fall. So we need to disconnect this, take it out of the machine, get it off, pull it completely out, and rewire everything. The end cap, the end connector, put it back on. So we have to take this apart to see how it's wired up in there so that we can wire the next one just like it, and solder it actually to that connector. Usually these have epoxy in them though, so we'll see. It did have epoxy in it, but luckily it's coming apart, so that's good. Now we just need to take this end piece off so we can get to the pins. The way these go together is you got these pins on the back where you actually solder the wires to. This just slides over like so, and this just screws on like so. The problem is this one has been epoxied, so I'm gonna have to break that epoxy up in order to unscrew this so I can get to those wires. I need to see what pins they're on. I can look up the schematic, but that's gonna take a while. This will probably be quicker. There we go, we got it moving now. There it is. So now we know where those wires go. We can solder them on. Nice and simple, in the field fix. Just clean that up a little bit more so I can see exactly what number they are. They're numbered. Alright, well, I got it cleaned out. You can actually see where it was shorting out inside the plug. So red wire right here looked like it was touching that other pin, maybe touching the yellow at the same time. See how it burnt up that plastic down there? I mean, it melted it. And that's why that sensor was getting so hot. It was shorted out. So interesting. I've never seen one do that, especially when it had epoxy on it. But this wasn't really epoxy. This is like some kind of rubber potting. It's just like it's rubber. Interesting. If I had real epoxy in there, that wouldn't have moved. Alright, let's fix it. Now this one, that is a 40-foot Topcon cable. MCRS, or MCR3 to MC2. That is Topcon. What I'm using is a generic cable. Like I said, it is difficult to get imports right now, especially from Topcon. So we just got a roll of generic cable, which should be just fine. Again, it's all about installation, installing it in the correct location so it doesn't get damaged. But this one obviously had failure in the plug, so we will make sure that ours does not fail in the plug. So I got a brand new connector, but this piece here I'm going to reuse, and this piece I'm going to reuse. So this goes on first, this goes on second, and then it screws to this after you've got the wires soldered on. So yeah, it goes this way, and this one goes in there. Just helps stabilize that cable back here. Just skive yourself off about 2.5 to 3 inches worth, and it's got to have enough for this when it's screwed in to actually apply right there at that lip. This sensor only uses the green, yellow, red, and black, so you can go ahead and cut off the rest of these wires. Just solder them on. Make sure you put all the pieces on before you go ahead and start soldering those wires on. I forgot to show you that one. Anyways, so just double check, make sure those are correct before you epoxy. So yep, green, yep, yellow, red, and black, and again they're numbered so you can see the numbers. And then basically just slide this back up, screw it on, and then you're just going to fill that with epoxy, and I'll show you how to do that. So you just get the first piece in line, screwed down. I use another sensor as a base. It keeps it upright and keeps it secure while you're soldering and while you're putting the epoxy in. So now we'll just get the epoxy mixed up and we'll pour it in here, and then we can bring everything else up and screw it in. I use the Scotch-Weld 3M epoxy potting compound 270 clear and the applicator. Just squirt out both, just have enough and mix it up. I use a little screwdriver and then I just pour it in. And there we go. So that epoxy, that's going to keep them wires from actually shorting out like they did here. As you see, that other stuff was pretty well rotten. It probably wasn't mixed up properly. Mix it up really well, and then just go ahead and screw these right in there, and it's done. Just hold it upright like this for an hour or so for it to cure, and it's good. And there you go, all done. You could actually reuse these connectors if this wasn't shorted out inside. You could probably actually reuse this one. Just have to test it. Of course, I mushed it up a little bit trying to get it off, but you can be a little more careful than me. I knew I was going to replace it with a new one, but you could reuse those. Having shorted out like that in there, it's probably fine as long as you put potting mixture in there better than what it was. So now all we have to do is the other end and wire in the plug. So we'll put Deutsch connectors on, looks like the small pins, and add that connector to. And there you go, field made cable. Just go install it. Alright, we got our MC2 cable installed, and it is drying the epoxy, and all we need to do is wait for it to finish getting tested, and then we can install it and we can run it. I'll have to seal that up and after it's done drying in that position, I'll mount it up here. But now let's check out this slope sensor, why it's not getting power. We'll check the cable, see if the cable has power. It might just be a sensor issue. We'll see, that's a pretty old sensor. Well, the cable has voltage, and I'm going to assume the cable is fine. And we'll actually dismount that sensor, plug in a new one and test it. So I tested the new slope sensor, and still that was not working. So the only thing it could be, the slope sensor comes up to the rotation sensor here. But I'm going to check the rotation sensor from MCR3 all the way up to here, this long cable, just to make sure that that's good. And I brought the other end out so I can test the pins. If there's continuity going through it, we should be good. If that cable's good, then we'll just turn to that small slope sensor cable. So I don't like those cables anyway. They're kind of, I don't know. They're just not Topcon cables. So the issue actually turns out to be a bad rotation sensor. I was getting continuity through it, but the sensor actually wasn't reading. Alright, so it ended up being the rotation sensor, which makes sense because it's weird because I had continuity going, well, yeah, I had continuity going up to it and then coming out, but not all the way up to the MCR3, which is weird. So I double checked the main fall sensor, and that was good. So I was like, well, let me just try this. I shot a new rotation sensor on it, and sure enough, everything went green. So weird. That was a little difficult to troubleshoot. Strange that it was difficult to troubleshoot, but I'm going to set it on a flat surface right here. We're going to square up that blade. That way our rotation is going to be good. And we'll set the rotation to 0. Calibrate that sensor, and we should be good. Alright, so the values are good. Rotation sensor's good. All you do is you square up the blade. You actually take your tape measure and you square it up with the machine. Get it perfect on each side, the right and left. Sometimes there's a mark, sometimes there's not. It's better to double check. I just went from inside of the tire, there's that metal framing, I went from that to the blade on each side. And then up in the system, when you click on the sensor tab, it'll open up the values and it'll say blade rotation. It was reading 46 degrees when it was straight, just because I put a brand new sensor on it. And all you got to do is set that to 0. That makes it 0, and that grader's good. Get back to work. This one, we got a 12H Caterpillar grader. Same problem as the last 14H. MC2 cable was damaged. As you can see, I tried to repair it last time I was here. I didn't have the cable. Just wired it up. These usually never work because they work for a little while, but that's it. And it had too much resistance, of course. So we're going to replace the cable today, build them a new one, and put it in and test. Same thing as in the 14H. This time we're reusing this connector. Black, red, yellow, green, same configuration. Yeah, we got the cable run into the MC square sensor. It looks like this is a double cover, and this cover is welded on, so it makes it really tough. But the position that it's in made it even tougher to run this cable, because this cable has to be loose up here, and it has to be loose in a manner that doesn't catch on all these parts and pieces. So I made it so it slides through, and then when you bring it up and you tilt the bucket and all that stuff, it slides nice and it doesn't catch on anything. So that's what happened to it last time. It looks like I got caught right there. So yeah, all good. System's green, ready to go to work.